So just like when you're float fishing and choosing the right float, how important that is for your day, I would actually say choosing the right feeder is even more important for a good day's feeder fishing. And it really is a basic of, good practice when you're feeder fishing and making sure you're getting the best from your day. Now, traditionally, obviously feeders were sort of side loaded, I guess, like that, with a plastic top or a wire top, something like that. And that was great because when you load the feeder, when you scoop your bait in the feeder, you nip it in from either end, and then obviously as you retrieve, the water flushes through and empties your bait out. Great. But for me, when I was squeezing that ground bait in and I wanted to cast a bit further, it was always difficult. I couldn't be accurate. I would find that the bait gets stuck in the feeder. So I've had to adapt my feeders, or the feeder choices available now. I mean, I can get a much better bait presentation and just catch more fish by being more accurate and making sure the bait goes into the peg how I want that to happen. So these sort of feeders here, the traditional side loader feeder, these are two that I carry, both weight on the side. These are basically anything up to about 20-25 meters. I'm going to be choosing this feeder, because anything further than that I'm finding I have to cast it a bit too hard. But I still love this feeder because I get to sort of nip the bait in how I want it to behave on the bottom, and then it can empty itself. Obviously the solid one is brilliant for getting your bait down to the bottom nice and cleanly, and the cage one is great if you want to create that bit of a cloud or a bit of attraction on the way down, or even just have something that's a little bit more exposed so it sort of breaks down a little bit quicker when it's on the bottom. So for me, those two types of feeder are still a really important feeder, and something that I carry, like I said, for up to about 20 meters. Now when I get past that, when I want to cast that a little bit further, you just cannot beat a feeder with the weight at the bottom like this. The accuracy these bring, the way they cast, the way they're designed these days so you can empty your bait cleanly. It's a feeder that I find myself using often at any distance. Sometimes I just almost bypass the side loaded feeders even though they are still got a place, because these feeders are so good. You can see, like for example with ours, the weight is tapered there, so the bait empties really cleanly on that feeder. So you're getting the weight at the bottom, but you're still getting a nice clean empty of the bait. It works perfectly. Of course, there's wire versions as well. And these sort of feeders are great when you want to cast in. You can get your bait to the bottom, but again, it's all about how hard you squeeze your bait in the feeder. If you squeeze that bait in there hard, the plastic is going to hold that in nicely and then allow the water to get at it and break down quick. Wire is even more exposed, so what you can do with that, you often find bits break off that on the way down and it's really attractive. But of course that's even moved on still, because we've got winder feeders these days excuse me, both solid and caged. And of course a winder feeder, I think there's people who don't fish winder feeders, they don't really understand how they work, but let me tell you, it's basically exactly like a normal feeder. The bait still gets to the bottom and it empties, but they cast like a bullet. So when I'm loading a winder feeder, look, even if I just wanted to use ground bait, I can just scoop that ground bait in the winder feeder, push it down there. Again, I control how firmly that goes in. And of course we've got the weight at the bottom, which means all of that bait gets to the bottom in one piece. It doesn't come out on the way down. And then as you retrieve, the water goes in and flushes that bait out. So I basically like to use those sort of feeders when the water's deep, when I want to make sure my ground bait gets to the bottom without breaking up. That's when I use a winder feeder. If I want a little bit more attraction, a little bit more draw, I'm going to be using wires and opens. But again, weight down. So anything over sort of 20 meters, I'm always using that weight down style feeder. But don't forget the old classics, because there's still a place. But you imagine those sort of 5 types of feeder, that's going to cover you for all your traditional feeder fishing. But making the right changes and putting the right feeder on at the right time will catch you more fish.